Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nitbarek. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'bracha. David's coffee.
Morning.
Good morning. Good Chodesh.
I'm doing it for students. True. You teach better.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
So we're on the second day of Nisan. This day in 1920, the Rebbe Reshab passed away, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. His son, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, took over the mantle of leadership for 30 years. And then, of course, in 1950, with his passing, our dear Rebbe. So we're in the month of Nisan. We're going to do a mimer that we learned either 2 or 3 years ago. But guess what? I forget, you forget. And even if we don't forget, we always need a review. This is a famous mimer, Be'emashtei Asar. It's one of those like iconic discourses. It was said on Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday, the 11th day of Nisan, 3-4 days before Passover. In 1971, 54 years ago, a few years ago. And it begins with the words, B'yomashtei Asar. Okay. Begins with the words, on the 11th day, Yom Nasi Livnei Asher. It's the day for the prince, the leader of the tribe of Asher. So we just finished in the Torah reading that on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which was yesterday, today's the second day of Nisan, right? Every day, 3,336 years ago, a year after the Exodus, a year minus 2 weeks, on the first day of Rosh Chodesh, they inaugurated the Mishkan, the sanctuary, with the Mizbeah, with the altar, and bringing offerings on the altar. It was, inauguration. And the Kohanes did the job, right? 7 days before that, Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching them, right? Last week's Torah portion, the week before, we dealt with. So each day of the 12 days, there was a different leader from a different tribe bringing the offering. So on the 11th, it's Asher. So the Medrash says that all of the tribes that they brought the offering for the redemption of the Jewish people and for the praise that they are called with their name. So Asher, he's called such a name because of redemption of the Jewish people, as the verse says in Malachi. Fortunate are you.
Asher means happy.
Fortunate, happy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there's no real word for happy in Hebrew.
Okay, that's right. You said that before.
Right. Actually, give me a second. Right. Yeah, so fortunate are you, or happy, if you will. All the nations, that they will be, because they will be with you, all the nations, because you are a desired land, Amar, so says God. So that is the redemption. In other words, nations of the world will recognize nations of the world will recognize how fortunate it is to be um, connected to the Jewish people. That's redemption. The praise, what's the praise of the Jewish people? Is Ashrei Ha'am Shekach Alai, Ashrei Ha'am She'Hashem Elokah. Fortunate is the nation that so it is. Fortunate is the people that God, that Hashem is their God, right? Ashrei. This is from Ashrei every day we say. Continues, this is the Medrash, remember, right? The Medrash is explaining Asher, the tribe, the 11th tribe, to bring an offering on the 11th day of Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday. And again, the Rebbe is saying this 1971, on his birthday, celebrating with. So, what is fortunate of the Jewish people is only that they chose God to be their God. And that God chose in them that they should be their treasured nation. Therefore, when the leader of Usher came to bring the offering on the 11th day of Nisan, we said 3,336 years ago, to be precise, and a few days from now, on the 11th. Today's only the 2nd of Nisan. Right, today we say from the tribe of Shimon, if I recall correctly. Or is it Ruve? Okay. So, anyways, page 390 in the blue sitter, 390, 91. So that's we should say every day the Nasi. So when he brought his offering, he brought it with on this that the choice that God chose in the Jewish people from all the nations. As it says, as the verse says in Devarim, Deuteronomy, Parshas Re'eh, in you, God chose, Hashem your God, to be a treasured nation. Okay, that's the Medrash. On this, asks the Rebbe in his discourse, we need to understand the beginning. It says that fortunate is Israel because they chose God, right? And then it continues. It says that God chose the Jewish people. Seems to be an addition. Like the main point is we chose God, not that God chose us, right? Back in the day, yeah, we chose God. And then afterwards it says about Asher, what's fortunate of Israel, right? That's the first thing it says, that he brought his offering. Remember, the Medrash gave the explanation, and then it says, what did Asher do when he brought his offering? That he brought it with being mindful that God chose us to be his treasured nation. Well, it's the opposite. We just explained that we chose him. And now when he's bringing that God chose us. How do we understand that? Also, we need to understand, what does it mean to choose? Choose means only when there's two things that are equal, right? So coffee that I make and coffee that David makes are not equal. Not all coffees are equal. L'chaim. David's coffee is preferred, even over Starbucks.
You're fortunate.
Fortunate, exactly. But that's not choice. There's no choice involved. Not a free choice, it's a compelled choice. Not a real choice, right? So what does it mean that that the Jewish people chose God over strange gods, right? How can you say that? Is there really a choice? I'm going to choose Zeus over God, right? Like, that's ridiculous. It's not a real choice. So what do we mean by that? Because choice means if I have before me an orange and an apple, and I'm allergic to oranges, I don't have much of a choice. Of course, I'm going to take the apple. And I love apples. Not really a choice, right? I have an orange and an apple, by the way. Okay, I have. So that's not really a choice. Likewise, that God chose the Jewish people. What does that mean? Like, we we were reading books and looking into purpose of life while the other nations were just swinging from trees. Like, is that much of a choice? Like, God chose the Jewish people. Like, come on. It's like, is there much of a choice between like Hamas and Israel? I mean, there are deluded and crazy people out there. That's true. It's not really a choice who to stand behind, right? Not really. So the God chose the Jewish people. What does that mean? Like, what? You're going to choose the idolaters Nimrod, the king, or you're going to choose Abraham? Like, come on. What does it mean exactly? So Tanya explains in chapter 49 of Tanya that it's not the soul of the Jew that God chose, it's the body of the Jew. That a body of a Jew and a non-Jew are equal, no difference, and yet God chose it. That's choice. Well, that's good from our perspective. How about from God's perspective that He chose? I mean, there is a distinction. Not a distinction. How do we understand that? Okay, that's all the preface. That's all a springboard to go into the next part, which is the main part of. We're going to come back, um, as Dr. Brower would say. This is like the passport to entry into the discourse, into the discussion. Now we're going to go into the main part that we're going to learn, and then we'll come back to these questions much later. This will all be understood by first prefacing that which Jeremiah said in Lamentations, Chelke avayamra nafshi, my portion is God, so declares my soul. This is what we're going to come to understand. What does that mean? Achayim. Achayim. So the Medrash, again, quoting a Medrash, quoted a Medrash before, right? To understand about the offering on the 11th day by Asher, by the leader of Asher. So the Medrash gives a mashal, gives a metaphor to a king. Listen carefully. This is the whole important teachings now. Get this clear, because based on this Medrash, this metaphor will be the continued teachings. A metaphor of a king that came into the countryside or came into the kingdom, right? and others from his palace went into the kingdom, and with him came the Duchsin, the Ifrechin, the Istalteleton, the dukes, the ministers, the you know, the high officials, right? Let's say the minister of agriculture, the minister of finance, the minister of defense, big people. So one of the citizens said, I choose the agricultural. I'm saying agriculture. I'm saying these things. It's not what the actual literal translation, but to make it more personal, right? Election going on in Canada over here, you know. So I choose the agricultural minister because he was a farmer. Hey, right? So, you know, I need him. One chose the finance minister because he, you know, wanted some big money so he could finance a big project that he's going to go into. And one said, I want the defense minister because he's on a border, right? Neighboring a hostile, you know, other kingdom. Again, I made that up. One is the dukes, the minister, whatever it is, right? People, three individuals that are high officials in the king's court, right? Then, pikeach echad, there was one smart individual there, and he said, Ona nasi malka. These are the words. Ona nasi malka. I choose the king, not the ministers. I choose the king. And the Midrash continues, gives a reason. The kulam is chalfin, malka ena mischal. Because all of the ministers, they are interchangeable, right? He's a minister today of agriculture, but who knows about tomorrow? And the king is not interchangeable, right? The king remains king. L'chaim. So that's the metaphor, right? What is the analog? Continues the Medrash. This is the Medrash. Likewise, the nations of the world, they serve the sun, they serve the moon, they serve celestial bodies. But the Jewish people, they only serve God Almighty. And that's what is written in the verse, Chelki Avaya Amra Nafshi, God is my portion. So declares my soul. That's the Medrash. Know it well. So asks the Rebbe on this, knowing that there's seemingly, what does the Medrash say? A smart guy. Even a child knows, but you have to be smart, that the king is greater than the ministers. You don't need smarts to choose the king over the ministers. Also, you need to understand the reasoning that ministers are interchangeable and the king will always remain in his position, right? Now, obviously, there can be a coup and there can be a takeover. You know, it's a metaphor, so that's not the right. Were there kings that were toppled? Yes, but not in this metaphor. Right? God's not going to be toppled. So, seemingly, the choice in the king is not because the others are interchangeable and not the king, is because of the great virtue of the king. Especially from Jewish perspective, a king is what we call head and shoulders above the people. In other words, the character quality of the people, that is the head, the shoulders, which is the heart, right? Character quality, and the head. He's a head above. He's a head above, meaning in character quality, in personhood, a head above everybody. That's why he's the king, head and shoulders above, right? So then why do you need a reason that they're all interchangeable? It's because the king, not even if he's not interchangeable, even if he is interchangeable, in this moment, he's greater than the ministers. So what does that mean? So tomorrow we'll continue with these teachings. All right? Hope you got it. Hold on to it. And tomorrow